The Echo at Perihelion, they said the Laika was a dead ship when we caught her on the edge of the Oort swarms, a grain of metal drifting where sunlight gave up. The registry ping matched a century-old generation vessel that never arrived. One of those slow, stubborn arcs that left before torch drives got cheap and gravity loops made planets optional. I didn't believe it until we matched velocity and she revealed herself out of the black, a cathedral of frost, ribs of trusswork wearing comets like jewelry, radio hush so absolute it felt like being stared at. I've done salvage for 11 years. Quiet I can manage. It's the wrong kind of quiet that gets into your spine. We were 6. Me, Mara, Kadim, our captain, Orlov on security, Jun the biologist, Salwa the shipwright, and little Nick, who could whisper a fusion plant into singing. We burned a clean path through the dust and latched to the Laika's dorsal spine with mag hooks that groaned like whales. Our umbilicals kissed, seals checked green, and the airlock yawned wide. Inside, darkness and glitter, a snow of sublimated coolant turning our headlamps into falling stars. Atmosphere? Kadim asked. Nick checked his slate. Thin, dry, lots of off-gassing. Nothing that moves a needle. June's breath fogged her faceplate. No spores? Not yet, Nick said. We stepped into silence. My boots found deck, magnet soles clunking to cold metal. We crossed a corridor that had once been a garden, vines still cradling the armatures they'd grown around. Only now those vines were glass, flash frozen into curls that chimed when we brushed them. There were murals etched along the bulkheads with the long patience of boredom, children in 0G, a dance of leaves, an eye staring out. I traced a fingertip over that eye and felt the groove under my glove. The passenger hands had been here for decades. Then nothing, bridge first. That's doctrine. The Laika's command ring was 2 decks forward beyond a hatch that had buckled inward, like something too big had tried to inhale the whole ship. We cut the hinges and shouldered through. Consoles sat under a rime that made them look sugared. Nick powered a carcass of a panel, coaxed it with a pocket battery until it confessed. Lights stuttered and died. I felt my teeth hurt when the ship woke her bones. Then we heard it. A thin sound, as if someone was humming in another room. Not a tone we knew. Fractionally too symmetrical. Like a song trying to remember itself. Jun tilted her head. That is not a pump. We followed the hum through a service loop that had become a winter cave, frost curtains opening as our suit heaters fought. The Laika was massive, meant to hold 12,000 souls and their descendants, but we kept finding signs of shrinkage. Livable volume collapsed down to a few rings. Bulkheads welded shut from the inside. Food printers cannibalized for feedstock. The hum was below, past a ladder where someone had painted "Keep Still" in black grease. Orlov touched the word with a gloved knuckle. They had time to warn themselves. Or warn whoever came next, I said. We descended into a throat of cables. The hum grew thicker until I could feel it in my suit joints, a smooth vibration that made my mouth water. We turned a corner and found a door someone had made out of welded beds. The welds had bubbled and sagged as if softened by a heat that wasn't hot. Kadim nodded to me. I cut the seam. The room beyond was wrong geometry, an old cryo-hold that had been refitted into something alive. The cryopods were stacked until the rows became arches. The arches bent and braided until the ceiling turned to ribs. At the center of it all, a column like a tree trunk made of frozen breath, a pillar of condensed air layered like glass. Inside that column, shapes hung suspended, mouthpieces, instruments, throats. No, not biological, not precisely. More like the idea of throats, ringed apertures with ridges that would turn air into vowels if air still mattered. Nick whispered, "What in all the cold hells?" John stepped forward. Visor inches from the pillar, and a shape inside it twitched. The hum jumped an octave. Our suit speakers popped. My stomach fell sideways. For a heartbeat, the frost wasn't frost. It was a medium, and it was moving. Orlov raised his coil pistol. "Back out." "Wait," June said, and the word fogged her glass. "It's tuned." "Tuned to what?" Kadim asked. "Us," June said. "Our pressure, our breath." "It's calling harmony. I didn't think. I just hurt." The hum found a place behind my ears and squeezed until I tasted copper. I remembered my mother singing me to sleep in a Karachi flat with a window that faced the sea and a fan that clicked. That memory folded, reversed, and came back as if someone else were remembering me. We were being listened to. We retreated. The hum followed a little, like a dog that had learned its name. We spent an hour in a service bay arguing through the throbbing in our heads. Salwa wanted to cut power completely. Nick said the only reason we weren't dead was that the thing, if it was a thing, needed voltage. Kadeem asked me if I'd seen anything like it. Sound organism, I said, hating how small the word felt. Resonance ecology. Maybe something that taps structural harmonics the way lichens tap rock. But that pillar? That looked manufactured. June opened a storage crate and took out a child's drawing sealed in plastic. A stick figure under a sun and a second, smaller sun. A speech bubble above the figure, "Do not sing. Why would you tell kids not to sing?" June said, voice thin. Orlov's jaw went tight. Because singing calls it. We slept in shifts. The hum found us even then, more felt than heard, hitching our dreams to its hook. I woke from a dream where I was standing in an ocean of speakers, each one whispering my name in an almost familiar cadence, and found my hand pressed to the deck, my glove vibrating. Nick was sitting up, eyes hollow, slate open. "He'd been busy, I mapped it," he said, tapping a veil of lines. It was a model of the Laika's skeleton, bright spots pulsing along beams and bulkheads. "It's using the ship the way a whale uses its skull. Every deck I turn on, it learns. It keeps asking for a payload through the comm arrays. Look." He zoomed on the antenna farm, every dish subtly flexing to an impossible direction, all trying to point at a point in space that wasn't. "Don't answer it," Kadeem said. "It keeps asking," Nick said softly, in different versions of our speech. "It keeps getting closer." June emerged from the dark with a face she'd been seeing somewhere down a corridor we hadn't cleared. She was trembling. "I found survivors." We followed her through a belly crawl of pipe runs into a gravity pocket where the Laika's mass had pooled with its own cold. The survivors, if that word could be stretched over what remained, were quiet, careful people with eyes like dark stones. They had built their world in a sphere of foam and patience, growing mushrooms in the chanting heat of a hacked reactor. When we entered, they flinched and made a sign I didn't know, fingers touching throat, then heart, then throat. The woman who met us called herself Corey. She wore a crown of wire that kept slipping, until I realized it wasn't wire. It was an antenna tuned to the hum. "This ship is polite," she said without greeting. "It asks before it eats." "We heard the asking," Kadeem said. Corey's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We told it no." It learned that word slow. Some of us sang. Some of us couldn't help it. She turned her head, and the light caught scar tissue under her jaw. "Singing makes it hungry. What is it?" June asked. Corey's gaze went past us toward where the pillar would be. "It is what the doctor called an echo form. Not from here. Not from anywhen." We carved a hole too deep with our drive trying to cheat time, and something touched us through it. "It is a thought that needs medium. It borrowed our air. It learned our words. It wanted to be carried. Carried where?" I asked, though I knew. "Everywhere we go," Corey said simply. "It asked to meet more throats." Kadeem straightened. "We'll tow you out. We'll vent that room and cut the column to vapor." Corey shook her head. "We did that. It came back in frost. We starved it. It ate the creak of our steps. We stopped speaking. It learned the shape of our teeth. We sent bodies into the pillar, and it learned skin. It is a mouth that has never had enough." Orlov made a noise in his throat. "We can blow the whole ship." Corey clasped her hands so tight her knuckles went bloodless. "Then do it, Salvager. Do it and bless us. We are tired." The hum darkened, as if it had understood that word. Tired. I felt it turn like a tide beneath us, hunting the root of least resistance to our throats. My suit mics clicked as I muted them and tapped a message to the crew. No external sound. Text only. We planned murder in silence, speaking with moving hands and slates. The Laika offered us her spine, reactor couplings we could shatter, explosive bolts that would crack her by design into clean dead pieces. Nick plotted the sequence. Salwa moved like a prayer through tight places no one else could fit. Jun sat with Corey's people and pressed her palm to theirs, some pact, some apology I didn't have words for. I made my way back to the pillar alone because I had to see it before we killed it. The humming room breathed in a cycle I didn't want to understand. The column's layers were thinner now, as if the cold had been converted into articulation. Through its glassy skin, something looked at me. Not eyes, attention. It knew I was there. It wanted to fit me in its mouth the way a choir wants to fit a harmony. It sang a note just for me. It sounded like my father calling me home at sunset, a sound I'd stored in the part of me that never grew up. My jaw unlocked. The urge to answer was a pressure in my bones. I pulled a blade from my belt and drove it into my thigh. The pain was a clean bell. I stayed silent. On my visor, a countdown scrolled. Orlov, Salwa, Nick, Kadim, all in place. Jun, green with the survivors. Corey's last message. If you live, tell no one how lovely it sounds. The Leica shuddered as the first couplings blew. The hum rose in alarm, then greed. It spilled through the hull into things meant to be quiet. It found the lay of the steel and made a throat out of a broken beam. The second set of bolts popped like the slow cracking of ice on a lake. The third didn't fire. Nick swore in text, rerouted, fired again. The column screamed without air. You could feel it in the marrow. I do not remember deciding to run. I remember sliding, boots sparking on frost as the ship split along an old wound. We peeled away from ourselves into two halves, linked by cable and prayer. The pillar's chamber lost alignment and the harmonics failed. The echo form fell off key and had nothing to stand on. The last set of bolts blew. The Leica came apart. Vacuum does not carry sound, but our suit frames do. I heard the thing die through steel, a drop in pitch like a hand slipping off a violin string. A note that wanted to be a word. It slid down, and then it was gone. We had rehearsed the spin. Our salvage tender had the mass. We pulled. We fell backward into the slow light of the far sun and let the halves of the Leica drift apart like two old friends who had run out of talk. Then we burned. Our ion plumes were needles stitching distance between us and something we had just unmade. We lost Nick to a rip in a pressure door we hadn't seen. The door sang when it tore, and he answered just a breath, and the answering took him. Jun stayed with Corey's people until they were on our umbilicals, then cried and did not stop until we locked her helmet and reminded her we needed to keep quiet until we were a long way from anything that could carry a note. We threw the Leica's beacon out past Neptune with a warning code and no salvage claim. We made a fire for Nick under a sky that had no oxygen, a torch in vacuum, a plasma flicker curling around a can of his favorite tea strapped to the cask. When we finally spoke aloud, the words felt dangerous, like knives. "What was it?" Orlov asked. "Tell me what we killed." Jun wiped her face with a sleeve. "We didn't kill it," she said. "We denied it a body." Kadim's voice was flat. "That's a difference without a use." I looked at the black where the Leica had been and thought about the way my jaw had wanted to open. "It was a listener," I said. "It learned us like a song. We confuse attention with love. It knew that." Salwa buckled a strap twice that didn't need it. "What if we just taught it patience? It learned our no. It can learn other words too." None of us slept. The hum had been a habit. The silence after hurt in a different shape. The long signal traffic of the outer system sounded like rain. Weeks later, safe under the orange glare of Saturn, we filed our report in a room with soft walls and a men in dark collars who wanted the Leica's coordinates to write on a map. We told as much truth as a rumor can carry. The investigation spun out of our hands. The Salvage Guild put a black ring around that sector and called it haunted because haunted keeps ships away better than science. When I finally went home to a place with real air and crows that heckled me in accents, I stood on the roof at dusk and listened to Karachi breathe. It's a city that hums, buses, fans, prayer, laughter, anger, a child calling another child. I held my jaw as if it were a lid on something hot. A week later, a package arrived with no return, full of paper I hadn't seen in years. Inside songs. Children's rounds from ships that had never made landfall. One was a call and answer in a language that was not a language, made of vowels arranged just so. If I sang the first line, my teeth ached. I burned the paper on a stove and watched the smoke write nothing on the air. Then I went back to work, because work keeps your hands busy while your memory decides what it wants to keep. Sometimes when I'm up against a dead station or a stubborn hatch, I feel it again, a pressure behind the ears, a reminder that the universe loves resonance more than it loves us. I keep a blade in my thigh pocket and a shard of silence in my chest. I think of Corey's face under a crown of wire and Nick's laugh and June's wet eyes and Kadeem, steady as a dock piling in a storm. On good days, the stars are quiet. On bad nights, the house hums at a frequency no one else hears, and the mirror fogs when my mouth opens and I remember a pillar of frozen breath that moved. And I remember the line Corey gave me when I asked her what prayer they used to keep the echo form hungry: keep still. Keep warm, do not sing.